The Galactic Council Chamber was a huge dome made of crystal and light where representatives from many different alien species met to talk about issues that affected the whole galaxy. Ambassador Thomas Grant, a human diplomat with gray hair and kind eyes, sat in the middle of it all. He wore a plain, dark suit that wasn't too fancy or scary. There was only one person sitting quietly among creatures that looked like they had come from the most terrifying dreams of humans. The Vree delegates to his left were chattering nervously to each other. They looked like huge mantises, with their mandibles clicking and their antennae twitching. The lights in the chamber made their exoskeletons shine, and they talked to each other in quick bursts of sound that the translation devices couldn't keep up with. To his right was a Croft, a 7-foot-tall reptilian warrior with thick scales that could deflect most energy weapons. Their eyes glowed a dull red, and when they talked, it sounded like gravel scraping against stone. The current argument had been going on for 3 weeks. The Helios cluster, a part of space with a lot of rare minerals, was not claimed by any of the nearby territories. The Croft wanted it. The Vree wanted it. 3 other kinds of animals had made claims. Things were getting tense. Ships were coming together on the borders. Everyone could smell the war coming. Thomas raised his hand in a calm way. No one noticed a gesture at first because it was so simple and unremarkable. He waited until the fight was over and everyone was looking at him. "Maybe," he said softly, "we could share it?" The chamber filled with confused clicking and growling. Share? What did that mean? Thomas kept going, not bothered by the reaction. We break the cluster up into zones. Each type of animal has the right to mine in certain areas. We set up a council to run it together. Everyone benefits. No one dies. When you think about it, it's really not that hard. He smiled that warm, grandfatherly smile that everyone in the council knew him for. The kind of smile that made you think everything would be fine. Draxon, the huge Croft warlord, slammed his clawed fist on the table. People who are strong get what they want. This is how the universe works. You want us to beg for scraps like weak animals? Thomas didn't move. He had heard worse. Let's act like civilized people instead of animals fighting over a dead body. But that's just a thought. The other species were interested in what was going on. 50 years ago, humans joined the galactic community. They came in their simple but useful ships and reached out their hands in friendship. They didn't have any natural weapons. Their skin was soft and could be hurt easily. Without protective gear, they couldn't breathe in toxic environments or live in very hot or very cold weather. They were weak in every way that mattered in the galaxy. But they had said they would share their technology for free. They had helped make peace deals. They had sent medical teams to worlds that were sick with the plague without asking for money. They spoke softly and seemed to be genuinely confused by the idea of conquering for the sake of conquering. The council had gotten used to people, not afraid to ignore their suggestions, at ease with ignoring their worries. What could these weak animals do if someone decided to take what they wanted? Captain Rebecca Stone was in charge of the peacekeeping ship Olive Branch, which was in the disputed border zone near the Helios cluster. By galactic standards, it wasn't a very good ship, a light cruiser with only a few weapons that is meant for patrol and rescue missions. The kind of boat you sent when you wanted to show you care about peace but didn't want to scare anyone. Rebecca was a career officer who was 38 years old. She had short brown hair and a face that had been through a lot of stress, but still smiled a lot. She had been in charge of the Olive Branch for 2 years, and in that time, she had not broken up a single fight because no one thought she was serious enough to fight in front of her. David Chun, a young man who worked as her sensor officer, looked up from his console. "Captain, 3 Croft destroyers are getting close to us. They're going fast." Rebecca nodded in a calm way. "Say hello to them, David. Be nice to each other." The Croft ships came in with their weapon systems on and their engines blazing. They got within a few hundred meters of the Olive Branch, which was close enough for the smaller human ship to rock. It was a classic way to scare people, and they had done it a dozen times before. Croft destroyer the human vessel. The voice said over the speakers, "You guard what isn't yours. Get out of here or be taken away." Rebecca typed in the communication channel herself. "Good afternoon, Commander Vrax. Isn't it a nice day for a patrol? We're just making sure everyone is nice to each other. Don't get too excited, everyone. You don't have any power here, human. Your boat is a toy. Your weapons are weak. Go home before we decide to test them." Rebecca said, "Thanks for the advice," in a warm and sincere voice. "But we'll stay a little longer. Someone needs to watch things." "Have a nice day, Commander." The Croft ships flew around them 2 more times, getting closer each time, before finally breaking off and going faster than light. David let out a breath he had been holding. "They're getting bolder, Captain," he said in a low voice. Rebecca nodded and looked at the screen. "Yes, they are, but we don't get worse. We never get worse. That's not what we are." Over and over again, this scene happened all over the galaxy. People being buzzed, threatened, made fun of, and ignored. And they always answered with patience, with calm words, with that annoying, sweet smile. The galaxy looked on and made up its mind. People were weak, not strong, not dangerous. Sure, they were nice to have around, like friendly pets, but they weren't part of the big game of galactic power. They were just there. None of them knew or bothered to learn that people weren't gentle because they didn't know any better. It wasn't because they couldn't do anything else. It was a decision made after thousands of years of the most violent history any species in the galaxy had ever lived through. A choice made after seeing their own home world almost burn in nuclear fire. A choice that every person who chose words over weapons, peace over glory, and compromise over conquest makes every day. They were kind because they knew better than any other species in the galaxy what would happen if they weren't. And the galaxy was about to find out the hard way. The attack happened at dawn on Proxima Reach. The colony had been there for 15 years. It was a peaceful place where 3,000 people lived on a world full of rare minerals and air that was easy to breathe. They had farms that spread out over green valleys, schools where kids learned about the stars and Earth, and a small spaceport that linked them to the rest of humanity's growing presence in the galaxy. No one thought the Croft fleet would come out of hyperspace right above the main settlement. The shadows fell over the playground while Lisa Cooper was teaching her class of 8-year-olds. She looked up and saw the huge warships blocking out the sun. Their dark hulls looked scary against the morning sky. She couldn't understand what she was seeing for a moment. Then the alarms went off. "Everyone inside," she said, trying to keep her voice steady even though her heart was racing. "Quickly now, but don't run. Stay calm." The kids stared at her with big eyes. They had never seen a ship from Croft before. Most of them had only seen aliens in pictures and videos before. This was supposed to be a safe place, far away from the political problems in the core of the galaxy. The Croft soldiers came down in drop pods, and when they landed, their heavy boots shook the ground. They moved through the colony with brutal efficiency, pushing people into the main square. Families held on to each other. Farmers in their work clothes stood next to shopkeepers, mechanics, and doctors. Lisa held her students close and counted them over and over to make sure she hadn't lost anyone. When the Croft commander started barking orders, Jack Peterson, who ran the biggest farm on Proxima Reach, stepped up. He asked, "What do you want?" in a rough but calm voice. "These are regular people. We are not soldiers. We're just families and farmers." Vrax, a scarred veteran who was a Croft commander, looked down at the human with what looked like amusement in his reptilian eyes. "You are now hostages. Your government will work to get you back. You will obey until then, or else." They were locked in the community center, the school gym, or any other big enough place. Croft guards stood by every door, weapons at the ready and always visible. There was food twice a day, but not enough. They only got a little bit of water. The kids cried. Adults tried to be strong for them. Warlord Crothix himself came on the 3rd day. He was huge even for a Croft, and his scales showed the scars of 100 battles. He walked through the colony like he owned it, looking at his prize with obvious pleasure. He turned on the colony's communication array and sent out a message that was sent to every council member world, every news network, and every ship with receiver in the galaxy. Screens all over the place showed his picture. People could be seen huddled together behind him, scared but defiant. "Humans of the galaxy," Crothix said, his voice dripping with scorn. We have taken over Proxima Reach and its people. The Croth Dominion now owns this world. If you meet our reasonable demands, your people here will be treated well. He wrote them down. Full mining rights for the Helios cluster. All human ships must leave the disputed border areas. Acknowledgement of Croth's right to rule over 6 disputed systems. Transfers of technology. Payments of tribute. You have 48 hours to accept these terms, he said at the end. Your people here will face consequences if you don't. We know you people. You talk about working together and peace. You talk things over. You make a deal. Let's make a deal. Everyone will be safe if you meet our demands. The transmission stopped. Ambassador Thomas Grant watched the broadcast on a holographic display in the Galactic Council chamber. He had his hands clasped in front of him, and his fingers were so tightly interlaced that his knuckles turned white. The other species around him whispered and chittered to each other. The ambassador from Vree came up to him. I'm sorry to hear this, Ambassador Grant, but you will surely talk it over? That's how people are, right? You always find a peaceful way. Thomas didn't answer right away. He was looking at the video of the hostages, looking at their faces and seeing their fear. He knew some of them. He had been to Proxima Reach spoke at the school 2 years ago and had dinner with families who had invited him into their homes. The Croth delegate, a lesser warlord named Drexen, laughed. Your people should have stayed on your little homeworld. Human. The weak shouldn't go to the galaxy. Agree to the terms. Accept your place in the natural order. Other kinds of animals nodded. Some people looked sad, but most of them seemed to agree. This was how things were in the galaxy. The strong took what they wanted. The weak gave up and lived. People would talk things over, make compromises, and life would go on. Thomas got up slowly. He asked for a direct line of communication to the Croth homeworld. The council gave it to them because they were interested in how the humans would give in. The same networks that Crothics had used to show Thomas's face across the galaxy. His face was calm, almost creepy, but there was something in his eyes that the other species had never seen in a human before. Warlord Crothics, he said in a quiet but clear voice, you have taken our people. You have made threats against our kids. You have ignored every effort we've made to live together peacefully. He stopped and took a deep breath. I have the authority to give you one chance. Within the next 24 hours, let every hostage go free, unharmed. Get out of Proxima Reach. Go back to your area. We will see this as a serious mistake and try to find a diplomatic solution if you do this. The hostages in the Proxima Reach Community Center watched this broadcast on the screens that the Croth had left on. Lisa felt a tiny bit of hope. This might work. They might back down. But Crothics replied right away. He laughed, and Thomas's picture was replaced by his. A deep, rumbling laugh that echoed through the transmission. 24 hours. You give us an ultimatum? He laughed even harder. Your ambassador offers us mercy? What will you do if we say no, human? Send your ships to keep the peace? We have seen them. Toys. Jokes. You don't have an army. You don't have any weapons that are scary. You have nothing but words. The Croft soldiers behind him also laughed. The other species in the council chamber were also laughing, though maybe more nervously. They still thought it was funny that humans were making demands. Thomas stayed on screen until the laughter stopped. There was no anger on his face. No anger. It was just a sadness so deep that it felt like it added 10 years to his life. 48 hours, then? Crothic said it in a mocking way. To give you time to get ready to give up? That's fine. You have 2 days to agree to our terms. Not a minute more. The transmission was over. The council chamber was full of conversation. Different species were already talking about what the humans would give up, how they would spin this diplomatically, and what it meant for the balance of power. Thomas sat back down. He looked at each council member one at a time, his eyes moving slowly across the group of aliens. Some people met his gaze and then looked away, not liking what they saw. Some people looked back with amusement or pity. He finally said something. Even though his voice was barely above a whisper, everyone in the room could hear it. We made an effort. We really did try. God help us all. The words hung in the air, making it feel strange and scary. But no one knew what he meant. They would soon enough. There were 40 warships in the Croft defensive perimeter around Proxima Reach. All of them had fought in many campaigns and were veterans of many wars. They flew in careful formations around the planet, using sensors to look for any ships that might be coming. The leaders were sure. They had looked at ships made by people. Little, not heavily armed, not for war, but for exploration and keeping the peace. So when the first readings came in, they thought it was a problem with the sensor. "Commander, we're detecting a huge gravitational disturbance," the sensor operator said, sounding unsure. More than one slip space signature. Very big ones. Commander Vrax looked at his screen with some interest. Most likely a human diplomatic convoy. "Let them in. We'll show them their people and send them home with what we want." But the ships that ripped through space weren't diplomatic ones. The first one come out was huge, almost a kilometer long, and its hull was a dark gray that looked like absorbed light instead of reflecting it. Weapons lined its sides, not the small defensive turrets of human peacekeepers, but huge railgun batteries and missile pods that could destroy cities. In letters 10 meters high, the name Retribution was painted on the bow. Admiral William Hayes stood on the bridge of the Retribution, hands behind his back, watching the tactical display as his fleet finished the jump. He was 62 years old and had been a career officer for 40 years, getting ready for a day he hoped would never come. His gray hair was cut short like a soldier's, and his face looked like a man who had seen things he wished he could forget. "All ships report ready, Admiral," his executive officer said. Commander Rachel Kim was 20 years younger than Hayes, but she had been chosen for this mission because her psychological profile showed that she could do what was needed without thinking twice. "Systems for weapons are up and running. Targeting solutions are locked." Hayes slowly nodded. "Send a note to the Croft leader. Only text. Tell him he has 5 minutes to turn off his weapons and move back 10,000 kilometers. After that, we will see any armed ship as a threat." More ships came out of slip space behind the Retribution, all in perfect formation. The end of the world. The rage. The judgment. Revenge. Boom. Storm. Names that made people think of anger and violence. Names that didn't fit with what the galaxy knew about humans at all. There were 37 ships in all, and each one was a reminder of humanity's bloody past. The last Earth War, which almost wiped out all of humanity, had built them. Nuclear weapons had set fire to whole continents. Cities had turned to glass because of orbital strikes. Billions of people had died before the remaining countries finally put down their weapons and promised never to do it again. After that, these ships were taken out of service and stored in deep space facilities. They were kept in good shape, but never used. The technology that made them was made illegal, banned, and locked away as a reminder of the worst times in human history. Up until now. The commander of the Croft got the message from a human and laughed. 5 minutes to give up? These people were out of touch with reality. He opened a channel to his fleet. "All ships, get into battle formation. Get ready to fight. Let's show them what real ships look like." Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell was in charge of the weapons on the bridge of the Retribution. Even though his body was full of adrenaline, his hands stayed steady on the controls. He was 28 years old and had been getting ready for this moment since he was 18. All of the simulations, every practice, all of the exercises. Everyone hoped that the war would never happen, but all of it had been preparing him for it. His grandfather fought in the last Earth War and flew a bomber during the Beijing campaign. When Ryan was a kid, the old man told him stories that still scare him awake at night. Stories about what people could do to each other when they weren't holding back. "Weapons hot, Admiral," Ryan said in a calm, professional voice. Targeting solutions confirmed on all 40 enemy ships. Hayes looked at the clock. 5 minutes had passed. The Croft ships were getting ready to attack and turning on their weapons. Not a big deal. Once the Croft decided to use violence, they didn't do any diplomacy. "You have permission to engage, Lieutenant," Hayes said quietly. "Fire at will." Ryan's fingers moved over controls. He didn't think twice. Not able to. There were 3,000 people on that planet, and their lives depended on what happened in the next few minutes. First, the Retribution's main railgun batteries fired. Magnetic acceleration sent tungsten projectiles flying at a speed that was a large fraction of the speed of light. The Croft shields were as useful as tissue paper at these distances. The first 3 Croft destroyers were destroyed by impacts that released energy equal to that of small nuclear weapons. At the same time, the other human ships fired. Hundreds of missiles flew through the void, each one controlled by AI systems that had been banned in the galaxy because they were so good at killing. The Croft Point defense systems tried to shoot them down, but there were too many of them coming too quickly. Like deadly flowers, explosions spread across the Croft formation. Vessels from Croft trying to return fire. Commander Kim said as she looked at her tactical display. Shields are holding at 98%. Not much damage. The Croft had nice ships. Well armed. Well protected. They had built an empire on their military strength by conquering a dozen species with these ships. But they had never seen anything like this before. The human fleet moved in perfect sync, with each ship covering the others and making overlapping fields of fire that left the Croft with no way to escape. There was no battle. It was a killing. Lieutenant Mitchell's display showed target after target going dark. He had learned how to do this in training, but nothing had prepared him for how it felt. Each icon that went away stood for hundreds of Croft crew members. He pushed the idea out of his mind. Later. He could deal with it later. He had a job to do at the moment. A Croft battlecruiser tried to get away to slip space, and its engines were getting ready for an emergency jump. The Fury stopped it, and her captain showed no mercy. A bunch of torpedoes hit the battlecruiser while it was in the air, and it ripped itself apart as it tried to get into a dimension that was no longer stable. It was over 17 minutes after the fight started. 40 Croft warships turned into wreckage. Not a single ship with people on it had been badly damaged. The shields on the Retribution had dropped to 96%. That was all. That was all the people who died. There was no noise on the bridge of the Retribution. The crew sat at their desks and thought about what they had just done. Some people looked sick. Some people looked shocked. Ryan Mitchell looked at his console and the empty tactical display where 40 enemy ships had been. Admiral Hayes took a deep breath. This was the moment he had been dreading, when humanity stopped being the kind people and became something else. Older. Open a channel to the surface, he said. It was something the galaxy had never seen before. All frequencies. I want Warlord Crothix to hear this in person. The communication system turned on. When Hayes spoke, his voice was calm and cold. Warlord Crothix. There is no longer an orbital defense fleet. You have 1 hour to free all the hostages unharmed and leave Proxima Reach. We will show you exactly what our ships can do to ground targets if you hurt even one person or resist in any way. You have seen what we didn't want to show you before. Don't make us show you more. He turned off the transmission. All over the galaxy, on every world that could communicate, species watched the battle on video. The sensors had picked up everything. The weapons of humans moved too fast. How brutally effective their tactics were. The violence was so bad that it was hard to take. The Galactic Council room was a mess. Representatives yelled at each other, demanded answers, and asked questions that no one could answer. Where did these ships come from? What were people? How did they keep this ability a secret? Ambassador Thomas Grant sat still in his seat and watched the chaos around him. He had thought this day might come. All of the human ambassadors knew. They all thought that their patience, kindness, and desperate efforts to make peace would be enough. They were wrong. Now the message was sent, written in fire and debris across the void. People were kind on purpose. That choice could be taken back. And when it did, the galaxy would find out what people had been trying to forget for hundreds of years. They were very, very good at hurting people. They had just decided not to be. Until now. Warlord Crothix stood in his command center on Proxima Reach, watching his empire fall apart in real time. Reports came in from all over cross-space. At the same time, human fleets had shown up at 7 important military bases. Not by chance. Not in an opportunistic way. They had made plans for this. Organized it. Every strike hit at the same time across dozens of light years. How? He yelled at his officers. How did they find out where our bases were? How did they get through our defenses? Nobody knew what to say. It was thought that the Croft military network was impossible to break into, but it had been fully mapped. Every stronghold, every shipyard, every place where weapons are kept. The people knew everything. Exactly 1 hour after Admiral Hayes' ultimatum, the rescue mission began on the surface of Proxima Reach. Just as promised, the ships that carried people came down quickly and hard, landing in a circle around the colony. The Croft guards didn't have much time to get ready before the attack started. But this wasn't the hesitant, clumsy way that peacekeepers acted. This was a whole different thing. The first team to go through the community's center doors was led by Major Kate Richardson. She was 34, small and quick in her movements. Her eyes looked everywhere, even in the shadows. 8 soldiers in powered armor followed her, their weapons ready. For years, they had practiced rescuing hostages by running drills in exact copies of civilian buildings and learning to tell the difference between targets in milliseconds. The guard at the door raised his gun. Before he could shoot, Kate shot him 3 times in the chest. Middle of the body. Businesslike. Neat. She was already moving away from him when his body hit the ground. Inside, hostages were huddled against the walls while Croft's soldiers stood guard over them. Kate's team moved through the building like a knife through butter. It took only a few seconds to clear each room. The Croft guards who tried to fight back died quickly. People who dropped their weapons were zip-tied and moved to the side. Lisa Cooper, the teacher who had been protecting her student for 5 days, looked up when armored people came into the gym. For a scary second, she thought it was more Croft coming to carry out their threats. Then she saw the patch of the flag on the soldier's shoulder. The flag of Earth. Soldiers are people. "We're going home," the soldier said in a soft voice, even though he had a gun in his hands. "Everyone, stay calm. We have you." The kid started to cry, but this time it was tears of joy. Lisa couldn't stop crying either. After 5 days of fear, she finally lost control. At the same time, Sergeant David Chun was going through the school building where another group of hostages was being held. His team met more resistance here. A Croft squad leader had locked himself in a classroom with 20 hostages and said he would kill them if the humans moved forward. David didn't talk things over. His team used thermal imaging to find all the Croft in the room, and then they broke in from 3 sides at once. Flashbangs. Cigarette smoke. A mess. In the midst of the chaos, David's team killed the Croft soldiers with shots that came within inches of the hostages but never hit them. The smoke cleared, and all 20 civilians were safe and sound. But the Croft weren't. One of the soldiers, a young woman named Helen Park, gently picked up a 4-year-old girl who was too scared to walk. The little girl put her face in Helen's armored shoulder and held on tight with her small hands. Helen took her outside into the sun, whispering words of comfort the whole time. That soldier, that kind woman who was comforting a scared child, had just killed 14 Croft guards in less than 2 minutes. Her gun had just cooled down, but she spoke softly and touched the girl carefully as she gave her to the medical team. The galaxy didn't get this about humans. They could change. They could be harsh when they needed to be and kind the next second. It didn't go against what was said. It was power. All 3,000 hostages were freed within 3 hours. The rescue didn't hurt a single civilian. The Croft garrison on Proxima Reach had been completely taken out, but the people weren't done yet. Their empire was being slowly taken apart all over Croft space. Not completely destroyed. The humans weren't trying to wipe out all the other species, but they were so badly hurt that it would take generations to rebuild. Precision strikes hit the shipyards at Crax Prime, where the Croft built their warships and destroyed the orbital construction facilities. The metal and other materials were still there, but they couldn't make weapons anymore. The Croft military's home base, the fortress world of Draken, had its shields down and its weapon systems locked. Cyber warfare teams from other countries had already gotten into their networks weeks before, putting in backdoors and kill switches that all went off at once. When the Croft technicians tried to get around the lockouts, they ended up locking themselves out of their own systems. Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell, the same young man who had used weapons on the Retribution, was now part of a different kind of attack. He was in a small room on a stealth ship, and his fingers flew across holographic keyboards, breaking through Croft encryption as if it were made of paper. He told his boss, "I'm in their logistics network. They have stockpiles of ammunition in 47 places. I can mix up the inventory databases, so they can't find out what they have or where it is. Do it, was the answer. Ryan worked while watching code flow across his screens. This was war in the age of information. You didn't have to break the bullets. You just had to make sure that no one could find them. But the humans didn't stop at the Croft. Every species that had sat in that council chamber and laughed, every government that had ignored human warnings and voted to ignore their concerns, suddenly had to face a terrifying reality. Their military networks had been hacked. Totally. The Vree Collective found out that people had mapped out all of their hive ships, knew where they patrolled, and knew how they talked to each other. They got a polite message letting them know this, along with demonstration. Their flagship's weapon systems shut down remotely for exactly 60 seconds before coming back online. A warning. We can do this whenever we want to. The Xian Republic found messages that were similar. The people knew where their missile silos were. They had gotten into their command networks. They could get to anything. The same shocking news was reaching species all over the galaxy. They had thought the humans were harmless, but those same humans had been quietly and carefully learning everything about them, making a map of their defenses, knowing how their technology works, finding their flaws. It must have taken a long time. For decades, even. For a long time, smiling human diplomats had been going to council meetings to help and share technology. At the same time, human intelligence services were getting ready for the day when kindness would fail. Admiral Hayes sent one last message from the bridge of the Retribution. It was on every channel and in every world, so it was impossible to miss. Screens all over the galaxy showed his face. He seemed tired, older than he was before the fighting started, but his eyes were clear and hard. To the Galactic Council and all species receiving this transmission, he said, for 50 years, people have worked for peace. At every chance, we have offered friendship, cooperation, and compromise. We have taken insults, ignored threats, and dealt with aggression with patience. He stopped for a moment to let that sink in. Some of you saw this as a sign of weakness. You were wrong. We weren't weak. We were nice. There is a difference. The tactical display behind him showed human ships spread out across dozens of systems. We are not conquerors. We don't want an empire. But we won't put up with attacks on our people. The Croft Dominion did that wrong. They don't pose a threat to anyone anymore because their military power has been cut down. They have let their hostages go. We have responded to their aggression. Another pause. You know what we can do now. You know that we know where your defenses are, what you can do, and how to get to you no matter where you are. We did this while smiling and shaking your hands, going to your councils, and listening to you make fun of us. His voice got harder. We were kind. We were never out of options. Keep that in mind. We chose peace not out of fear of war, but because we understood the consequences of war. We still want peace. But now you know that it really is a choice. It's our choice. And we will do whatever it takes to protect our people. The transmission was over. The Galactic Council chamber was completely quiet. Species that thought they were the strongest military powers suddenly realized they had been completely infiltrated. The people had been getting ready for this day since they first joined galactic society. They hoped it would never happen, but they were ready if it did. Without saying a word, Ambassador Thomas Grant stood up and left the room. There was nothing else to say. The message had been made as clear as possible. People chose to be kind. Don't ever confuse that choice with being unable to do it. Don't ever think that their patience was a sign of weakness. And never, ever make threats against their kids. The galaxy had learned its lesson. The next question was if they would remember it. 3 weeks after the end of the Croft War, Ambassador Thomas Grant walked back into the Galactic Council room. Species had been making fun of humans' weaknesses the last time he was here. Now, you could have heard a pin drop as his footsteps echoed across the shiny floor. All of the representatives were there. Everyone had come to this session. The Vree were perfectly still, and their usual chattering stopped. The big Faxians, who usually rule the area with their aggressive behavior, were now hunched over in their seats. Even the crystalline Zorvathi, who rarely showed any emotion through their mineral bodies, seemed to dim their inner light as Thomas passed. He sat down calmly, set his datapad in front of him, and waited. Speaker Velana, the council chairwoman, who had 4 arms, cleared her throat nervously. "Ambassador Grant," she said, and her translator had a hard time getting the tremor in her voice across. "The council wants to talk about what has happened lately, to get a better idea of what people can really do now." Thomas nodded his head slowly. "Speaker, I'm here to help you understand that." The quiet lasted a long time. No one really knew how to start. In the end, the person from Cross spoke, not Warlord Crothix. He was waiting for his trial for war crimes. This was Ambassador Drex, a civilian diplomat who had been trying to keep his government together for the last 3 weeks. "What do you want from us?" Drex asked directly, his lizard-like face looking tired. "Our fleet is gone. Our defenses are weak. Our empire is falling apart. Tell us how much you want us to live." Thomas stared at him for a long time. "We don't want your empire, Ambassador Drex. We never did. We just want peace. Real peace, not just a lack of war, because we don't fight." He stood up and turned on a holographic display that showed how things were in cross space right now. Their land was still theirs, but now every major world had human monitoring stations in orbit. Thomas made it clear that the Croth Dominion would stay independent, but there are some rules. Your military will only be able to defend itself. No ships bigger than a frigate, and no weapons that can destroy a planet. There will be people watching you for the next 50 standard years to make sure you follow the rules. Drex's claws scratched his desk, but he nodded. What choice did he have? "The families of Proxima Reach will get reparations," Thomas went on. "Not in money, but in work and resources. Your people will help you fix what you broke. You will have to deal with what you did directly and personally." "And what about Warlord Crothix?" asked another Croth delegate. "He will stand trial for taking hostages and threatening civilians. Under human law, he should get a fair trial with full legal representation. He'll serve his time if he's found guilty. We don't kill prisoners, even those who are war criminals." A younger woman named Tixala, who was the Vree ambassador, raised a delicate claw. "And what about the rest of us? The species whose networks you got into? What are your conditions for us?" Thomas turned to look at the whole council. "No terms. We got into your networks to protect ourselves. Nothing more. We won't use that access unless you give us a good reason to. We don't want to control you or threaten you. We just wanted you to know that we chose to be peaceful, not because we couldn't be." He pulled up another screen, this one showing where the human fleet was. Most of the warships were already pulling back to deep storage facilities. There were only a few left on active duty. "We're demobilizing," Thomas said. "Most of our military fleet will go back to being reserves. We don't want to be the police in the galaxy. We don't want to be an empire. We want what we've always wanted, to live in peace, trade, and share ideas and culture." Thox, a grizzled warrior who was the Xian representative, growled low in his chest. "But you could take it all. You have shown that you are strong. The strong rule in our culture. Why don't you take what you could easily get?" Thomas smiled sadly. "Thox, we've already been down that road before. We fought each other long before we got to the stars. Nation against nation. Ideology against ideology. We made weapons that could destroy the whole world, and we came very close to using them." He brought up pictures of the past on Earth. Clouds that looked like mushrooms. Cities that were destroyed. Graves for many people. "We learned something from those dark years," Thomas said. The council members who had never seen human history were shocked. Being strong doesn't mean you have to be in charge. You don't have to use your power just because you have it. We decided to be better than our worst instincts. To us, civilization doesn't mean no violence. It means the choice to stop it. There was no sound in the room. They were seeing something they had never thought possible. A species that could be very violent, but really didn't want to be. Captain Rebecca Stone was back on patrol in the Olive Branch, sailing through the same areas that had been in dispute before the war. The ship she was on hadn't changed. Same light weapons. Same peaceful mission profile. The same crew, but everything else was different. Before, Croft warships would buzz her, testing her limits and making threatening passes. Now they stayed away. When she called them, they answered right away and in a professional way. There was no more mocking in their voices. Human vessel Olive Branch, this is Croft Patrol Ship Talon's Edge. The message said, "We are out of your patrol area. Not meant to cause trouble." Rebecca and her first officer, David Chun, looked at each other. He gave a little shrug. They both knew why the Croft were being so careful right now. They had learned that the friendly patrol captain could call in ships that would turn their fleet into trash. "Acknowledge Talon's Edge," Rebecca said in her usual calm voice. "Have a safe trip." Olive Branch out. She didn't like how scared they sounded. That wasn't why she had joined the military, but she knew it had to be done. People sometimes needed to know what you could do before they would respect your choice not to do it. The meeting was coming to an end in the council chamber. The terms had been set. There had been agreements. The galaxy was changing shape based on this new understanding of what humans really were. As Thomas was getting ready to leave, a young Vree collective member named Tixala came up to him. "Ambassador Grant," she said softly. She was shaking a little, and her antennae were twitching with nervous energy. "Can I ask you something? Not officially, but personally?" Thomas nodded, and his face relaxed. "Of course. Will you stay calm?" The question came out quickly. "Now that we know what you can do and you've shown us, will you choose to be kind again? Or was that just a mask until you were ready to beat us?" For a long time, Thomas didn't say anything. He thought about the pilots who had flown those combat missions, the soldiers who had rescued hostages, and the young people like Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell who had been trained for war but hoped never to see it. He thought about how many of them were having a hard time with what they had done, even though it was necessary. "Tixala," he said softly, "we really want to stay peaceful. We've seen what we turn into when we don't. War brings out the violence, hatred, and casual cruelty in us. Nothing in this galaxy could scare us more." He looked at the other council members who were listening behind her. "That's why we work so hard to be nice to all of you. We know what we can do. We know how easy it is to make excuses for violence and to believe that the strong should rule the weak. We told ourselves those lies for thousands of years." His voice got stronger. "But we also know where that path goes. To ashes and ruins, and generations that will always remember what they did. So, yes, we will choose peace. We will choose to hold back. We will choose to be kind." He grabbed his briefcase and walked toward the door. "But now you know what you didn't know before. It really is a choice. We made a choice. We're not nice because we can't be dangerous. We are kind because we have learned at a great cost that being dangerous does not make you right." He stopped at the door and looked back one last time. "Choose wisely if you want us to stay that way. We won't be as patient next time. If there is a next time, we won't give you as many warnings. We will still be careful and measured, but we won't hesitate to protect our people." The door clicked shut behind him with a soft sound that seemed louder than any slam. After he left, the Galactic Council sat in silence for a long time. They had learned something deep about people that changed everything they thought they knew about power and civilization. People were kind. They chose diplomacy over war, peace over violence, and patience over violence. But gentle didn't mean weak. Kind was not weak. They now knew that patience and inability were not the same thing. The galaxy had learned its lesson. The question was whether they would remember it or if another species would make the same mistake the Croft had made. They hoped it wouldn't come to that for the sake of humanity and the galaxy, because people would always try to make peace first, always offer the olive branch, always try to find a peaceful way out. But if you pushed them, if you threatened their kids, if you thought their kindness was a sign of weakness, well, the Croft could tell you what happened at the end of that story. And it wasn't one they wanted to do again.